up, guys? It's me, your girl, your Casey. How you doing? It's been a while since I've actually read a thriller because I have to be in a particular mood for them. But now, not only have I read one, I've read two. One pretty okay one, and one that was absolutely horrifying in just how poorly it was written. And so I'm going to combine it into one big humongous review, and hopefully you'll be able to find out if any of these books will be able to get you your thriller fix. Not the second one I'm going to talk about because that book was horrifying. So the first book I'm going to review today is The Wife Upstairs by Rachel Hawkins. Now apparently I am cursed to eventually read Jane Eyre. I've never read Jane Eyre. I don't want to read Jane Eyre, but I'm gonna have to one day because this thriller is actually a modern retelling on Jane Eyre. I did not know that when I first picked this book up from the library. And last month I read Brightly Burning by Alexa Dunn, which is also a Jane Eyre retelling, but that one's done in space. I didn't like that book. But this one was more my speed, and now I am kinda interested in reading a classic. Whoop-de-doo. I didn't want that to happen. So I have my window open, and my neighbor has his window open, and he's staring at me right now. I'm just gonna stare back judgmentally. So this Jane Eyre retelling suitably has our main character named Jane. Jane is a dog walker, which is honestly kind of the funnest job you could have because dogs are amazing. And she has recently relocated to Birmingham, Alabama because she is escaping a very scandalous background, one that has the authorities after her, and that had her change her entire name. She is not truly Jane. Part of why she was so eager to leave where she's originally from is that she basically bounced around through the foster care system, ended up in some bad places, and when she was able to age out, she got in contact with one of her foster brothers. His name is John Rivers, and he's located in Birmingham, Alabama, and she basically begged, hey, I need somewhere to stay, and he's like, yeah, sure, but, rent money, while he also puts the sleazy moves on her. So Jane's life right now ain't that glamorous, living with the scumbag, dog walking, also trying to work at a coffee shop, all just trying to live to make rent. This is the sum of her existence until one day she almost gets run over by super mega hot guy, Eddie Rochester. Eddie does the suitable gentlemanly thing to do. He apologizes for almost running her over with his SUV, invites her in for some coffee, and they start like chatting it up, and he's cute, she's cute, single, a widower. That's right, Mr. Eddie is a widower. His wife, Bee, and her best friend, Blanche, they both died in this awful, awful boating accident, bequeathing Eddie his wife's very successful business. So, he's cute and rich. But anyways, he and Jane, they're talking, and Jen's like, I'm a dog walker. And he's like, oh, I know, I saw you in the neighborhood. You want to help me pick out a puppy? Just some sneaky excuses to keep her around, keep her coming to his house. And eventually they start dating. And this has the local housewives in this really fancy neighborhood all in a tizzy. Because they're like, oh, this girl comes from nothing. Don't she think she's one of us? And one of my favorite parts about Jane in this book was that she loathes these people, but she wants that rich lifestyle, which is what originally drew her to Eddie, because he can offer her protection from her past, stability. Also, he's a cute guy. And while she is covering up everything about her and she isn't really honest with anything at all, he is the antithesis of that. He's sweet, charming, just generally cares about her and from basically everyone. And while Jane feels like she has to be very placid, let people walk all over her, Eddie is like, if you get on my bad side, I'm gonna tell you right away. So they balance each other out really well. And Jan in this new neighborhood, like I said, she wants stability, she wants that rich style, that rich lifestyle. And here she is transitioning from being that dog walker, basically a peasant among all these queens, who occasionally just stole from them, just prove hey, yeah, you're so rich, you wouldn't even notice this is gone and I need this money. But now she's one of them and she's studying them, trying to figure out how to act like them. Because not only does she have to gain their approval, she wants Eddie's approval too. Because this book is mostly about Jane, who is now dating Eddie, trying to live up and measure up to the previous wife, the deceased one, Bee, who was insanely successful, a self-made multimillionaire. And by what everyone around her is just telling her, Bee was the perfect wife. And Jan, in order to transition from the past that she's trying to keep buried. She's ready to take on this new image, and she's trying to become the people she hates. But you know, not everything is as it seems in the suburbs, because the mysterious circumstances surrounding the death of Bea and her best friend Blanche. The case is suddenly reopened with some new evidence emerges into the light. And it seems that Eddie is actually hiding some secrets from his past as well. So that's the summary for The Wife Upstairs. Immediately when I just read like the summary on the dust jacket, I was like, this is Rebecca. And like I said, since I've never read Jane Eyre, I don't know if the original Jane Eyre is anything like Rebecca, but I love Rebecca. So I'm like, hey, I like this. Like the living up to a previous occupant or previous girlfriends, like just her whole level of how awesome she was, like having to live up to that expectations, not only surrounding Eddie, but also just like the whole neighborhood, all the eyes that are watching this very cute, famous couple. And it took about 50 pages of reading for me to actually get hooked by the book. My current score is a 3.5. It could have been an easy 4, but there was one thing at the end I'm like, nah. But the first 50 pages where we're getting to know Jane and Eddie, Jane was being, you know, kind of standoffish, judging the really rich ladies, just being kind of sneaky, and I like that. She had a lot of bite in her. And her as a protagonist, just being so morally gray as she is, and with her past, I really enjoyed her. I was ready to know her backstory. I did not like Eddie at first, because Eddie, I thought he was just so pretentious at first and so aware of how much money he had. Like he was rubbing it in and everything. And also just rubbing in the fact that he's single now. Like he literally says a bit later in his kinda not yet relationship with Jane, like, oh, like, aren't you glad I'm single now that I'm a widower? Because now you can step in. Like he kind of paraphrasing, but he says that. I'm like, well, you're a jerk, aren't you? But then, thrillers are so hard to talk about non-spoilery because we're only 50 pages in, and the thing I want to tell you now that happens right around 50 pages is like the biggest spoiler in the book. So we'll save this for the spoilery section, but for my non-spoilery points real quick, it was a very well-written thriller. My thing about thrillers is that I want them fast-paced with not a lot of description. This one gave me like just enough description that I could really like see the colors, because this is like really down south. So people wear a lot of vivid prints, tropical patterns and stuff like that. I could see that, I could taste the food. It like described furniture very nicely. All of that was great. The banter and the talking between characters was very organic. The characters, like I said, I didn't like Eddie at first, but now I do like him. Not love him, like he made some choices that I kind of get, but I'm also like, you could have handled that so much better, but you can't really. Well, I guess you can get mad at people for their stupidity, but he has a backstory too, like a past, and that is what kept me in this book. Like I had to know why he was doing the things he was doing in this book. His past and Jane's past that she was running away from. Those are like the main draws. But also, that's like the only thing keeping me in the book. Because, you know, it's a thriller, so I want that suspense and I want twists around every corner. There's maybe just like that, there's two twists in this book. Unlike something with Riley Sager where every other chapter like gives you something new to chew on. For this book, it's really just waiting to find out what these two people, Eddie and Jane, did in their past. That's the selling point. Like, I didn't feel creeped out. I didn't feel watched. No suspense, really. I was just intrigued. I wasn't really invested. Other than just the murder investigation and the suspicious backstories, there's nothing really else happening in the book. It's literally just this couple living their life in a neighborhood. My last other complaint that took off like half a star for this book, it would have been a 4 otherwise, but towards the ending, the resolution is kind of forced to happen by this event that's not explained well in the book. Like, why did this event happen? And this one event that is just suddenly there, like, solves everything. Not solves, it just gives one character the chance to run because of this most random event that wasn't explained well. I don't even know how this event happened. But past that weird event that triggered the climax, the ending itself I did like. It has a happy-ish ending, but it's also very ambiguous. And I think because of that, it's very realistic. A lot of thrillers have a very dynamic ending to give the reader that sense of, wow, that's a great book, and I love ending like that. But this one, like, I get why that happened. So that is the end of my non-spoiler thoughts. I do think it's a good, fun thriller just to like, you know, just like peruse your way through. If you want something with more bite and action in it, go pick up a Riley Sager book. This one's pretty chill for a thriller. But I do think the best part is the main protagonist, Jane. She's very good, has many layers, and I wanted her to have a happy ending, and she kind of maybe got it. Kind of. Like I said, ambiguous. Ambiguity. I don't know if ambiguous is a word, actually. However, we're going to talk about some spoilers now. So welcome spoiler people, by the way. Final warning. I was debating if this next section should even be in the spoilers because it's literally in the title. It's that thing that you realize around the 50-page mark that I talked about. That you realize that the old wife, B, didn't drown. She's still alive, and she's locked upstairs by Eddie in their house, while Jane is living with Eddie. And B, the old wife, I guess not the old wife, I mean, she's still technically Eddie's wife. She's stuck in this one room, and all she has to do is read a book that Eddie brought for her, and she has a pen or a pencil, and she's able to like write down her thoughts in between the words of the book that Eddie brought her. And in these little scribblings, we find out that it was Eddie who killed Blanche. But then further on down the line, like towards the very end of the book, spoiler people, we find out that everything that this girl B is writing is a lie to cover up her own tale if she somehow escapes this room so she can put this kidnapping murder thing on Eddie, when in reality, she's the one who killed her best friend Blanche. Again, I want to say this book was very good with characters, because no one is really innocent. Everyone's made some bad decisions, dumb decisions, morally gray, and I love that. And while I was believing that in the beginning, I believed that Eddie killed Blanche out of jealousy for some reason. Okay, so my first theory, when I read the book, when I read the dust jacket and the little summary, is that, oh, okay, meet Eddie, recently widowed. He has become blah, blah, blah's most mysterious resident ever since his wife, B, drowned in a boating accident with her best friend. And I was like, okay, so we got two women who drowned in an accident. My original thought is that the two women, B and Blanche, were having an affair together and they ran off and the boating accident was like a fake. So that was my first theory. Turns out that was wrong. And then it's fake revealed that it was Eddie who killed Blanche. And so for the rest of the book, while I'm still wanting to learn more about Jane's backstory with her abusive foster father and how she kind of killed him by not giving him his heart medicine, I was still holding on and longing to find out why Eddie killed Blanche. But again, like I said before, Eddie didn't kill Blanche, it was B who killed Blanche. And ever since B and Blanche were very little, B's come from a place of poverty and having to really claw herself up in the world. Blanche was born into privilege. So when these two girls meet, B, like Jane, there's a lot of similarities between Jane, I was about to say G, B and Jane. There's a lot of similarities between Jane and Bleach. That was B and Blanche at the same time. Gosh, there are a lot of similarities between Jane and B. Like how they know what they want. They want this lifestyle and nothing's gonna get in their way. They're tired of having nothing, they're gonna get everything. So B makes her way up in the world basically by copying Blanche's entire lifestyle. Her famous company, Southern Manners, which sells like a lot of decoration stuff and clothes, is based off of basically everything Blanche wore, everything that was in her house, and Blanche notices that. She's like, girl, why are you basically copying and selling my life? And B's like, I'm not, but this psycho girl is, and I loved it. And I honestly do not remember what the inciting event was that made B want to kill Blanche. Like, I don't remember. I don't remember if just Blanche's incessant telling of B to stop copying her finally wore B down. It might have been that Blanche was flirting too much with Eddie just to get back at B. But yeah, something turned B against Blanche. B killed her, made it look like an accident, swam back to shore, and then Eddie, who I thought was the villain this whole time and still kind of is, he was at the lake house, he saw her, and he just scooped her up, threw her in the panic room, and he's like, this is a better alternative to telling the police, because regardless, he still loves her. And even he was kind of a gold digger. The way he met B, he knew she had money and wanted that money. No one is good in this book, and I love that. They're all awful. So I honestly love those parts, like learning why these people made these decisions, what makes them tick. But you know, this whole diary we're basically reading that B is writing in between the words of this paperback book, it's all a lie. But it's a lie we can kind of discern in a good way. It's not too obvious. It's very well written. Because while we're also reading these diary entries saying, oh, Eddie killed my best friend, so she'll have something she can give to the police when eventually she gets out of the panic room, we're also seeing flashbacks from her childhood, which really gives us the clues that she is not a good person, and it was very well done. And eventually, B does get out of the panic room because she manages to slip that book she's been writing into Eddie's blazer, his blazer pocket, when he comes up to visit her. Because yeah, he's living with Jane, but he goes up to the panic room to be with B sometimes too, because he still loves her. So eventually Eddie leaves the panic room with his jacket. He puts his jacket somewhere. Jane eventually finds the jacket, picks it up and notices how heavy it is, finds the book, finds what's written in the book, goes to the room she's never noticed before, which is weird. Like, girl, you live in this house and you never noticed this door before. Like, I think it was hidden in the back of a closet, but it's a door at the back of a closet. I think you would still see that. But she lets B go free, and I honestly thought B was gonna like outright kill her, but B's actually like pretty chill. Like, can I just get like some wine real quick before we call the police or something like that? And now we're gonna talk about the event that took off half a star. The fire that broke out, because while Jane was freeing B from the room, Eddie came up and he's like, what's this? What? And so Jane like picks up like a piece of furniture and smacks him on the head with it. He's unconscious. Some of his teeth pop out. And so they leave him up in the panic room, lock the door, and now B and Jane are just like chilling at the table with some wine, figuring out what to do next. Eddie wakes up and he's like, oh, I'm stuck here. And now it's up for him to find a way out. And he built this room, because that's his job. He's an architect or a contractor, I really can't remember. But since he built it, he knows there's only one way out. So, and this is where it's like, I don't know what happened, because it was literally just a tiny paragraph of information, but we're switched over to B and Jane's perspective, and Jane's like, we have to call the police. B is like, well, please don't call the police, because she's the murderer. And even Jane, listening to B talk, is picking up on this. But all of a sudden, the fire alarm goes out, and then B realizes what's happened. She knows that the panic room will open up, I think, if the fire alarm goes off. Or maybe it doesn't, because it's also said in the book that that's where they're supposed to go during a fire for some reason. Again, it was not explained well. And how did this fire start anyways? Did Eddie start the fire? How did he start the fire? He was in a barren room. Did he put some wires together? Like, I don't know. It's not explained. So that's the confusing event. That's like, oh, that's really handy, very convenient. Wasn't a fan of that. But after that, the house does burn down. Jane made it out alive. The police are led to believe that Eddie, who they are now like, oh, this is the guy who must have killed Blanche and B. They think they find his remains, but remember, he lost some teeth. So they just find his teeth in the ashes of this completely burned down house, and they're like, oh, he's dead. And it's not really answered if he's dead or not. Like, yeah, they just found teeth and they found no body. So it's up in the air if both B and Eddie made it out, or if they actually burned to absolutely nothing in the house. Jane manages to go off. She lives her life. Eddie had left her everything in his will, and now she has the opportunity to make something out of life now, so that's great. But even she's like plagued with the worry. Are they still out there? Are they gonna come after me for some reason? Because she has all of their money now. And she even thinks once that she saw them, like driving past in a car. But again, we just don't know. And I liked it. Again, I just can't talk enough or rave enough about the characters in this book, just how twisted they were. Just so greedy about everything. All of them are gold diggers, basically. Fame hounds. My main complaints are, again, that random fire that happened, and that there's no real suspense in this book, which is what I want to be creeped out in a thriller. I want to feel like I'm being constantly watched. In this one, the only thing that kept me hooked in the book was finding out their backstories. Why Eddie has kidnapped B, what Jane did that made her run away from home, and also what led up to B and Blanche's like destruction of their friendship and what ultimately caused B to kill Blanche. So I think in order to enjoy this book, you have to be a very character-driven reader. And luckily, I am. Again, 3.5, very nice. And you know, I have to read Jane Eyre now because I have to ask, did some British Victorian dude put some damsel in distress in a panic room? I don't know. Okay, for part 2 of this thriller book review, we're talking about one that I literally have nothing good to say about. I hate this book. It is literally the worst book I've read so far for this year. So buckle up, Buttercup. This awful book is called Even If We Break, by an author who knew I would hate it so much that the author covered up half of their name, so I wouldn't be able to find where they live and break their kneecaps. The only time you'll hear me be any kind of peppy or happy in this part of the video is me just telling you the summary. You might be into it. I don't think you will, but I will try to be as unbiased as possible and give you guys the bare details. So Even If We Break stars 5 characters. 5 characters who were good friends at one point, but are now kind of on a friendship hiatus because there's beef between 2 of them. Between Carter and between this really rich girl named Leva. Yeah, for the first part of this review, I kept calling Finn Carter for some reason, which just goes on to show you how poorly developed these characters are. If I can get the most traumatic of the backstories in this book mixed up with an entirely different character. So this is on the book, not me. I'm not taking the blame for this. That is her only personality trait. That is all I can really say for all these characters. They're only defined by one personality trait, and they're not even personality traits. Like, rich girl is not a personality trait, but that's literally all this person is. So in this friend group, we got Leva, the rich girl, as mentioned before, and it is to her fancy smancy cabin that our friend group is going towards to kind of rebuild their friendship. We also have Finn, who is just this like glowing nuclear ball of anger, who is just like the most untrusting towards everyone. Like, he hates that he's been dragged into this friend group again because due to Leva, for reasons we don't know yet, he was forced into a fight or someone was trying to pick on him and she just let it happen. But because their friend group leader, Ever, wants to try to get the friend group together, and Finn loves Ever, he's willing to try and give this a chance or just try to like survive the weekend. Ever's probably my favorite of the group, although they do kind of some shady things later on that makes me kind of not like them anymore. But they're the most stable and level-headed, and probably out of all the friends has the hardest life dealing with poverty, having to care for their little sister. We also have Carter, who is bland. Like, he's described as the mean kid of the group, but he's not actually trying to be mean. Somehow everything he says is mean, but it's like such a insipid kind of mean that it's not even mean. It's like this book couldn't even make a person mean. That's how badly they were at handling characters. And lastly, we have Maddie, who I am sad to say, her only personality trait is that she has autism. That is literally it. And do you think it is handled well in this book? No, it is not. So, our ragtag group were all best friends. No, they're not. Now some are trying to get back together while some are actively like hating this. They were all originally brought together for their love of role-playing. They're playing some kind of like Dungeons and Dragons rip-off game. I can't remember the name. And Ever's like, hey, let's all go to Liva's cabin and like play a new campaign. And we'll like, you know, become besties again. And we'll put the past behind us. We got people who like Finn, who is just determined to drag the past into the present at every opportunity. So first off, this book is told through first-person point of view, but every character, all 5 characters, has a chapter or multiple chapters. They all get their chance to tell their story. In the first 5 chapters, you know, starts with Finn, then Leva, Maddie, Carter, Ever, stuff like that. These characters are so unrecognizable from one another that if you do what I do sometimes and you're reading and you have to do something, you put the bookmark, not like on a chapter or anything, you just have to go right now. So you just leave a bookmark in there, you walk away, you come back, you pick up the book again, you start reading, and you have no idea whose head you're in. Because that's just how bland they are as a person. You can't tell just by their thoughts and actions who this person is. And for those first 5 pages where we get to see inside the heads of each of these people, we are immediately hit with like their backstories and everything. Like, this is why I am angry. This is why I am poor. This is why I'm nervous. This is why I'm a jerk. Like, honestly, this book is a masterclass on how not to write a character, because it is literally info dumping, literally telling instead of showing, not letting us get to like live out some suspense. It's not giving me, you remember last book, I was talking about the wife upstairs and how their backstories and how we didn't get to them till like the end of the book. That's what kept me hooked in the book. but immediately in Even If We Break, it's dumped right on top of us before I even care about these characters. So that's bad. And while we're like learning about like who these people are, or rather being forced to learn because of the info dumping, we're walking towards this cabin. So for 5 chapters, we're learning about these people, and it's just making it take longer to get to this stupid cabin, which is really bad in this book, because they go there, they start playing their Dungeons and Dragons game, and that game literally lasted almost 100 pages, and it was so boring. Like, I know there's gonna be murder in this book. Please just get to it already. I want some of you to die. Most of the things that gets me upset about this book and just how lacking it is that it's just so inactive. Nothing is really going on. Like, the plot does not get started until like 100 pages in, which, I mean, this book's only 300 pages. So for a third of the book, we're watching a bunch of nerds play Dungeons and Dragons rather poorly, and I'm begging for something to happen. And finally, it does. So, part of their Dungeons and Dragons campaign revolves around the history of their cabin in the mountain itself. It's a really contrived story that really just feels like it's jutted into the plot for convenience to lend a sort of spooky, like, oh, ghost story sort of tone. Apparently this mountain is haunted. One person staying in a cabin had their finger cut off or something. And wherever the ghost went, whenever the ghost struck down another victim, you would only hear like a music box playing. Stuff like that. And 100 pages in, it seems like that kind of haunting is happening to our characters. One of our characters gets tragically savaged under like strangely similar circumstances. Lots of blood, cuts, missing a finger. Sadly, it interrupts the Dungeons and Dragons game, thank God. And now it's just up for our remaining 4 people to escape this place. But they can't because this cabin is very electronic. Like, you know, fancy computerized door, and everything starts to go haywire. So for the majority of this book, there's this red herring guy, and the characters are trying to shift the blame away from them to the red herring guy. Like, oh, I know we haven't really introduced this character at all, and you don't even see him in this book, but we used to have this other friend, and he is definitely the one doing it. It's so obviously not him. We're gonna have to transition into the spoiler zone. But to sum up my thoughts about this book, spoiler-free, awful characters, awful representation of autistic people, or even awful representation of people talking to autistic people. Like, I gotta give this example because I literally cannot stop thinking about it. Ever, who is one of my favorites in this book, not really. Like the one I was depending on the most to give me a story, one of the people in their group gets hurt, like bad, electrocuted, and just goes flying across the room. Ever and Maddie runs to the wounded character. Ever, who has feelings for the person who's been like shocked. Ever's freaking out like, oh my gosh, what do we do? Maddie, the one with autism, her mind immediately goes to the practical. Get the first aid kit, dress the wound. Good stuff like that in this situation when a person is literally dying on the floor. And Maddie's like, I'm gonna go get the first aid kit. And Ever, for some reason, just spins around and snaps. Like goes, okay, you really need to work on your empathy right now. So, okay, I'm sorry nurses and doctors out there, you wanting to help people's wounds isn't empathetic. You're not nice. How is one person wanting to get a first aid kit to help solve the current problem, you know, help their literally dying friend be relieved of some pain? How is that not empathetic? The Ever who says this, how Maddie is not being empathetic in this moment, what's Ever doing? Ever's just running around like a chicken with its head and its legs cut off. Completely useless. Like that. I'm just like, where did that come from? So awful characters, and you know, this is a thriller. We got this murderer running around. One of our people is dead, finger cut off in order to like reenact this old legend of the cabin. And then another one of their troop goes missing too. The reveal of who is the murderer and why they are doing this is absolutely stupid. Like, it's obvious who did it. And I'm like, it's too obvious that it can't be them. Because then someone somewhere beta read this, edited this, and someone wrote this and decided that this was a good twist. And I can't believe someone is that dumb. But apparently there is. Like, this book honestly gives me hope. If this bad of a book can be written and traditionally published, my book can. But like I said, the murderer is obvious and their motive comes out of nowhere. Like, There is no build up, no justification for it at all. Literally pulled out of someone's butthole. So stupid plot, stupid characters, a very inactive plot. Like it's either, most of the book is either that Dungeons and Dragons game or it's literally just trying to break a window. Literally. We spent a lot of time just trying to shatter one window. It was boring. I could not get behind anything. So stupid. Only thing good I could say about this book is that the grammar was correct, so this is a 1 star for all of that. I want you to read it because I think we should get angry every now and then, you know, make the blood, like, you know, make the blood do its thing, you know. It's healthy to make your blood pressure rise just a little bit every now and then. Don't want your body to get too comfortable. Oh, and before spoilers, I have one more thing that I almost forgot to talk about. The dialogue. Every single thing out of these characters' mouths sounds like a public servant's announcement. Like we were honestly in a really like high intensity situation and we are pulled out of that high intensity we need to move situation because one of the characters, it's like they have to turn to the camera and they have to talk about why you shouldn't make fun of someone if they're triggered by something. Literally just complete shutdown of the pacing. I've never read a more script sounding book in my life. Okay, and now we're going into spoilers. We gotta talk about that killer. So what if you've been here before? Hi subscribers. Or if you're new here, also hi. In this channel, we have 3 rules for thrillers and how to spot easily whodunit. Rule number 1, no body, no death. If you do not see their corpse, if you do not feel the lack of a pulse, they are not dead. Rule number 2, if an article of clothing is constantly being mentioned or a body trait is constantly mentioned with one character, they did it. And rule number 3, the killer is always the person you cannot keep track of because they're always off screen for some reason. In this book, rule number 1 and rule number 3 apply because it's obvious that the murderer was Liva. Liva is apparently the first victim, but unlike Carter, who literally was killed, and we saw the body, so yeah, he's killed, he's bloody, his finger's missing, and that finger was later found in Liva's bedroom, but we didn't find Liva. Liva was the first to go missing, but she went missing. That's not being killed. So immediately, there's that. And because she's missing, we can't keep track of her. So also, that's rule number 3. It's Liva. Like the book kept trying to push the blame on this Sam character who is apparently part of the friend group, but for some reason, I can't remember, isn't in the friend group anymore. He's the one who was able to actually hack the cabin in a different time. Because you know, the cabin is very a high-tech cabin. Maddie and Liva at one time got trapped in the cabin because the doors malfunctioned and he was able to like hardwire his way in and let them out. So he's the one who has the skills to hardwire and like hack the house, but so does the occupant, Liva. So at this point, I already know it's Liva. I'm literally just sticking to this book because I've had a bad reading month already. So I'm kind of like resigned to the fact that I'm just gonna read bad books for the rest of my life. But in my mind, I'm also like, of course it's Liva. But I'm also begging, please don't be this dumb book. Don't be this obvious. But of course, the twist is revealed. Oh my gosh, it's Liva. And her reasoning for it is so stupid. All of a sudden it's revealed that her parents have basically raised her to be like this ruthless. Like they gave her a bunny and then they like taught her how to kill the bunny. And then they mentioned how it's like a rite of passage to do this, to kill people. Literally comes out of nowhere. This is honestly the lowest rated book I've ever read and it's completely justified. There is not a single redeemable thing about this book in my opinion. It deserves none of my respect, none of my love, and I'm actually happy to say that it's worse than Kafka on the Shore. Because at least Kafka on the Shore wrote pretty. Haruki Murakami is a good author. But thankfully this book didn't have incest in it. Or Colonel Sanders. Read it if you want, run away from it if you so desire. I highly encourage that last option. But I also like people getting mad at the same things I'm mad about so we can rant together. It's very juicy. If you disagree, tell me why. Maybe I missed something. I know I didn't, because I took notes, my friend. Honestly, I feel like this book just kind of like skimmed over all the important things it could have talked about. Like especially that fight that happened between Liva and Finn. It was such a big point. Like that's why their friendship broke apart. But when it was finally addressed what the fight was about, it just kind of glossed over it because it was so anxious to get back to their stupid Dungeons and Dragons game. It had the wrong priorities in my opinion, and I'm honestly not going to read this author ever again because I just don't trust them. So guys, thank you for watching my thriller review. If you have a thriller you would love to recommend, I'm always on the hunt for a good one. I like fast-paced, little descriptions, and I want to feel spooked out of my mind. Riley Sager, I read like almost all of their books. I just have like one more to read, but that's my favorite thriller author so far. Tell me if you've read these books before, tell me what you think. I want to know everything. But until next time, stay reading, my friends.